Okay, so this is fall 2014 RSO Treasurer Training, and I'm the USJ Treasurer John Fody. And throughout this presentation, we're going to go over all the ins and outs of the USJ financial system and some policies and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm going to try to make it as entertaining as possible, but I'll let you guys know it's a pretty dry presentation. So, after you watch this, you guys will have a better understanding of how everything works and what you have to do when dealing with me so that you guys can utilize your USJ funds. So this is me. I'm John Fody. I'm a little introduction. I'm a forensic science biochemistry double major. I'm a senior from Burnt Hills, New York, and you can see it from my campus involvement as well as my hobbies, which include, as you can tell from the picture, I love to shop at Savers from the SpongeBob shirt that I'm wearing. So yeah, that's me. All right, so here's an overview of how the USGA financial system and the money was derived. The lump sum of 1.65 million was initially given to USGA to then distribute to other RSOs by the Budget Committee last spring. The money can only be spent towards what it is allocated for, and there's three methods of payment: purchase orders, check requests, and credit cards, and we're going to go over all three in this presentation. So with purchase orders, it's a document that serves as a contract between the university and the vendor. The university is pushing towards utilizing purchase orders, and it is now the required way of paying vendors. It means if a particular vendor accepts POs, they must be paid that way. And generally speaking, a PO has to be created at least 2 weeks before the delivery of the product or service. So to ensure that the product gets there on time when you guys need it and that the vendor gets paid. So here's kind of the life of a purchase order. First, the RSO treasurer will create a purchase requisition through the financial system in Banner, through there, accessible through the UNH portal and utilizing their RSO-T account. Once the requisition is submitted and then is approved by myself, it gets sent to Grego in Student Activities, who will then review it and approve it as well, and then it gets sent to the business office, which is where the requisition will be generated into a purchase order. Once that purchase order is created, the vendor will be contacted by the business office with the purchase order. Then the vendor will contact the RSO and will send them an invoice. Once the RSO receives an invoice, it's very, very important that the invoice is returned to me in my office or my mailbox in Student Activities. So once the RSO gets an invoice from the vendor, give it to me. This is kind of the general flow of the life of a PO. Excuse me. You guys would first, again, communicate with the vendor regarding the product or service that you want to get. If it's a new vendor, you have to submit a W-9 form, which can be submitted to me or the business office. The requisition would then be created through, again, through Banner, and then it kind of follows a step outlined right here. I'm more visual, so you'll see throughout this presentation there's a lot of charts and flow charts to kind of help you guys know the general steps of what needs to be done to ensure that you get the product that you want and that the vendor gets paid. So here's an example of a requisition. The order date and the transaction date is typically when you put the requisition in online on Banner, and the delivery date is when you want that product delivered or to be received. The document text is very, very important. This is a way to communicate to the vendor, the business office, and yourselves what you're getting. In this document text, you can outline. It doesn't need to be as wordy as the one listed right here, but essentially just kind of overview of what you're getting. So if you were to get buses for an event, you could say we're getting a bus for Saturday, November 15th or something. The bus is going to pick us up at noon and will return us back the 16th at 10 a.m. or something like that. So it can just be a very not super detailed, but just kind of an overview of what you're getting in the document text. This is the bottom half of the requisition. For requisition commodities, that's where it will price out each of the different items that you're getting with the purchase order. As you can see with requisition commodities, there is a portion to outline again the different buses. This unit of measure is um, basically straightforward with units of measure. It can be anything from NA to feet, yards, pounds, pieces each, something like that. And then it will auto-calculate when you put in all the information, the total cost. For requisition accounting, the chart of accounts is always going to be H. The fiscal year is always going to be this year. And the index code is your RSO's index code. So whatever that RSO index code that you guys have for your organization is going to go in that field. Then you're going to hit validate. Once you hit validate, the rest of these numbers will auto-populate the fund in the organization and the program. This account number, you also have to fill in, and this kind of allows Banner to categorize in the business office what type of service that you're getting with this PO. Some final notes on purchase orders. The major use of purchase orders is really anything that's ordered, any type of product, any type of service. T-shirts typically are done this way, or actually are done this way. Transportation is done this way, as well as Sodexo and food service is done this way as well. Some code definitions. So the index code is, again, the code that the business office uses and Banner uses to recognize your RSO index. So, for example, miscellaneous is MISCU. That's the index code. The vendor ID number is the number that Banner uses to search for a vendor and validate them that they're in the system. Again, if they are a new vendor, their number may not be here, and that number will be created once the W-9 is sent to the business office. Then the code will be created. The account code, again, is the number that Banner uses to categorize. So food service, for example, is 716160. And the vendor ID and the account code are searchable features in Banner when you're putting in a requisition, so you can search for these numbers in Banner. There's also a Banner manual on how to do all the step-by-step instructions for putting in a purchase order on Inside UNH if you have any questions regarding requisitions. So, check requests. There's two major types of check requests. There's a reimbursement check and a contract check. All these forms, this form as well as all the other ones that I'm going to show you in the future, can be found under Charger Connection, under USGA and Documents, or on the Student Activities website. So for reimbursement checks, they're pretty straightforward. They're a check that's used to reimburse an RSO member or an RSO for personal expenses made towards the RSO. Most commonly used, again, for supplies when making an event. And the most important thing to note about reimbursement checks is to make sure that the funds exist for the expense that you're purchasing them for. So if you're purchasing supplies for an event, make sure that that event has a supplies budget so that you can be reimbursed. If there is no such fund or expense line for what you're purchasing money for your RSO, you're not going to be able to be reimbursed. So make sure your RSO has the money for what you're buying so that you can be reimbursed. Reimbursements, you just submit a check request with the original and itemized receipt. And another thing about reimbursement checks is you can only be reimbursed up to $300 for an expense. So if it's more than $300, you're not going to be reimbursed for it. So make sure that your RSOs plan accordingly so that you are able to utilize your funds and not have to essentially pay either out of pocket or not be able to be reimbursed for something. So again, $300 is the maximum that a reimbursement check can be cut for. So this is a contract check. It's very similar to a reimbursement check, except there's a couple other steps along the way that need to be done before the actual check request for a contract can be completed. And we're going to go over that in a second. But this is kind of a flow chart of the check reimbursement. Again, straightforward. Make sure you have the funds. Complete the check request form. It's approved by me. Goes to Grego. For approval, goes to the business office. You can either have, for any type of check, you can either have it held for pickup in Student Activities, or you can have it mailed to whatever address is listed on the check request form. So here's the contract portion again, as I said, for the contract checks. The contract authorization form is not an actual contract. This is just kind of used to let the Student Activities know that the RSO, President, Treasurer, and Advisor are approving this type of contract for this vendor. I will then sign off on it to verify that the funds exist. And this is only the very first step in getting a contracted vendor and paying them. So most major businesses have their own contract format. In that case, that we'll use their contract form. If you're dealing with vendors that don't have a contract, typically student DJs here at the university, there's a generic contract form that the university has and can be found on the student activities website, which is listed right in the presentation. So the step-by-step process of how this is going to work is you first have a contract that you have with a vendor. You're not going to sign it. They're going to give you the contract. You will then turn in that unsigned contract with the authorization form to student activities and to me. I will then approve the funds are there. Once I approve it, I give the contract to the coordinator of student activities, who's Colleen Carrion. She will then review it, make sure everything checks out, and then it gets sent to Grego, who will sign the contract if it's approved. After the contract is signed, the RSO will be contacted and will be sent a signed version, because Grego is the one that signs the contracts. Will be sent to their RSO account. Once that happens, you can then submit a check request. So you need to make sure that you're following up on your contracts and submitting check requests so that your vendor that you have a contract with is getting paid. So again, here's the flowchart of the contract check and how it would work. Basically what I just said, but it's in more pictorial view of how you would do that and all the steps along the way. Here's the credit card sign-off form. Credit card is kind of the wild card, I guess you could say, for forms with dealing with USJ funds and student activities. It can be used to purchase a lot of different things. It's typically used, however, to purchase supplies, gift cards, and prizes, which then need to be submitted. The form needs to be submitted with a merchandise prize form, which can be found on the student activities website. And then after approved, Office of Student Activities Coordinator, Melinda Hill, will contact the RSO again, letting them know that the card can be signed out. Important notes about credit cards. If taking your credit card out of the office, a faculty or staff member, graduate assistant, OSA staff member, or USJ stipend position. So anyone on the USJ e-board, any stipend position in scope, charger bulletin, or Chariot yearbook. If you're making the purchase online or over the phone, it has to be done in the office. Some common uses for credit cards, again, minor supplies, gift cards, and prizes. And here's a flowchart of that as to excuse me, how a credit card and flow of credit cards work. Funds transfer. So these are more USGA forms. Funds transfer is a way to transfer funds from one RSO to another, or from an RSO to a department. Again, available online, charger connection to student activities, and it's got to be completed by both RSOs and have their signatures by their treasurer or financial manager, and then given to me. Fund deposit forms. Use this form to deposit any type of fundraising or dues or prize money that your RSO has collected. And you complete this once all of the either cash or checks has been collected and is ready to be deposited. If your organization collects dues, your RSO is mandatory for your RSO for liability purposes to have student activities and Mindy utilize your dues collection. So a dues collection form can be found online under Charger Connection in the Student Activities tab, and you can fill out a dues collection form. Basically what that form says is what the start date of your dues is going to be, and when the due date of your dues, and when they will no longer be collected. And once that form is up, then the members of your RSO can come in and just let them know, or let Mindy know what organization they're a part of, and they can then submit their dues. At the end of the dues collection process, the funds will be counted by myself, Mindy, and the RSO treasurer to prevent any discrepancies, and then a funds deposit form will be submitted to complete the deposit process. So, for miscellaneous, if you need more money, organizations can come up to miscellaneous. The miscellaneous account is derived from the roll over money that was unspent from last year's USGA, as well as the money that was not allocated in yearly budget in the spring. So that's how miscellaneous kind of is derived from. And to complete a miscellaneous request, you can just fill out the miscellaneous request form, and it's always encouraged to be as detailed as possible when requesting money through miscellaneous. If you're a blue status organization, your budget cannot exceed $500. So if you have $300, say, that was given to you in the spring, then you can only request up to $200 in miscellaneous, because your budget cannot exceed $500. If you're a gold status organization, the sky is the limit, and you can request as little as you want or as much as you want through miscellaneous. So here's kind of how the miscellaneous request process works. After you submit the form, you and your RSO will be invited to a USGA Budget Committee meeting where the request will be heard for consideration. Following your presentation and your opportunity to defend your request, the committee will then discuss and vote on the request. Two things can happen from there. If the request is under $3,500, then whatever the Budget Committee's decision is, whether to grant all the money, no money, or part of the money, is kind of the final decision. If the request is over $3,500, then the committee simply makes a recommendation that will then be brought to the USGA legislature, who then has to vote on it to make the final decision. And once those things happen, then the funds can be transferred into your account for you to utilize. If your RSO has no budget and you wish to receive an operating budget, you can do that also through the miscellaneous account, and you can just do it the same way. You'd fill out a miscellaneous request form and attach an operating budget spreadsheet and supplement breaking down each of your each of your expenses. So there's two groups that have different policies in terms of their interactions with USGA. Greek organizations are allowed to have off-campus bank accounts that aren't managed by us in USGA or the university. For organizations, Greek organizations, to use this money, no USGA UNH approval is needed, and no liability is assumed either. You can't transfer funds between USGA and off-campus. And the recruitment paperwork and all transactions have to be handled through the now AGC treasurer for all recruitment money that needs to be utilized for Greek orgs. For club sports, dues accounts and hiring budgets are managed by Jeff Ryder in charge of rec. All transactions need his approval before coming to me. Funds can be transferred between these accounts, and these accounts still fall under UNH jurisdiction and have to abide by all university policies. So the most important thing of this entire presentation is deadlines. Deadlines. A contract authorization form must be submitted 2 weeks before an event for level 2 or level 3, or 1 month prior to an event for level 1. Failure to do so, just like with any of these deadlines, is they're not going to be processed or pushed through. So make sure that your organizations are staying on top of deadlines and when they're planning and organizing events. Purchase orders have to be in at least 2 weeks, again, before the delivery of the product or service. Check requests have to be submitted 2 weeks prior to an event, and for reimbursements, they need to be submitted 2 weeks after the event. So you have up until 2 weeks after the event to be reimbursed. If they're submitted later than 2 weeks, you will not be reimbursed. So again, stick to those deadlines and make sure that you're planning accordingly. Credit card sign-out has to be submitted at least 5 business days before the planned use of the card, so essentially 1 week before you wish to use the credit card. So Sodexo. When ordering food through Sodexo, be sure to notify me that a requisition is put on banner, and that has to be done. You have to put a requisition in on banner when dealing with Sodexo. And again, notify me when it's submitted. As soon as a requisition is up on banner and I approve it, I email catering, letting them know that you have the funds for your event so they can provide the food. And I will not email catering until that requisition is up. And Sodexo will not give you the food until they have my approval for the funds. So basically how this would all work when dealing with Sodexo is you would work with Sodexo to kind of organize what you want for your event. Once you get a quote and how much it's going to cost and what you're getting, you then put the requisition online for the total cost and each of the items that you're getting, and then it follows this process. So make sure that you guys do that. So here's some final notes. Funds can only be spent towards what they are allocated for. Again, very, very important. Email me anytime your RSO puts a requisition on a banner, because then I know that it's up and I can go and approve it and review it. And it's very, very important to tell me what expense line in your budget the PO is coming out of, because then it takes less time for me to have to track you down to find out where I'm charging it to, and then everything can get turned over a lot faster. Submit only this year's forms. So if you submit last year's form from the 2013-2014 year, they won't be accepted. And again, on all forms, make sure that the budget line you wish to use is clearly noted and your index code. The index code and the budget line are two different things, so make sure that you are aware of both. And again, all forms can be found online on Charger Connection or Student Activities. So here's some more notes. Friendly reminder, USGA funds can't be used to purchase alcohol. It can only be used to purchase what they were allocated for. In terms of budget reallocations, if your organization wishes to reallocate their budget, they will be heard on a case-to-case basis, where funds can only be moved within a line expense item, but not between expense items. And only under extenuating circumstances would these reallocations be considered. So here's the Assistant Treasurer, Aldo Gallucci. He's responsible for overseeing and chairing the Budget Committee, which again includes and encompasses the miscellaneous account, so he will handle all of that. He's also responsible for managing the USGA inventory system, as well as a number of tasks related to the position of USGA Treasurer. And that's basically it. That's the fall 2014 USGA Treasurer training. If you have any questions, my contact information is right there. And come see me in office hours if you have any questions. I would be more than happy to talk to you guys. I think I'm a pretty friendly guy and would love to answer any questions that you have. My office hours are right here. They are subject to change, but for the most part, they're probably going to be this way for the rest of the semester. So again, if you have any questions or anything at all, let me know. It is important to note that even though that you have watched this integrity session, there's going to be a quiz, more or less, that you have to complete in my office. It's a paper quiz that you have to do in here. That's kind of going to go over to the things that you saw in this integrity, so that I can ensure that you watched it and trying to understand how the process works. And again, you just let me know when you're going to come in and take the quiz. I will give it to you, and then you give it to me, and then you guys are good to go. And again, you cannot use or utilize your USGA budgets until you meet the 3-member minimum from each RSO to attend a treasurer training. So again, any questions, let me know, and I hope you guys have a great year of planning events and doing awesome things in your RSOs.